What looked like a royal fairy tale in spring 2018 allegedly hid a much colder reality behind palace walls. As Prince Harry and Meghan Markle married before a global audience, talk reportedly spread through Windsor that Queen Elizabeth II had once intended to anchor the couple more firmly inside royal tradition with a private home on the Balmoral estate. It was said to be a powerful sign of trust, acceptance, and a long-term belonging in the heart of the monarchy. But by 2026, that supposed promise had completely fallen apart. What was once whispered as a future inheritance has, according to palace commentary and royal reporting, been wiped off the board. The Balmoral dream did not just fade away quietly. It was cut out of the picture altogether, and the symbol tied to that decision was said to be the Queen's famous red box. For decades, those red boxes carried state business, private approvals, and some of the most sensitive decisions of the Crown. Even in her final months at Balmoral in 2022, Queen Elizabeth II was still seen as focused and disciplined. Reports tied to royal writer Robert Hardman have fueled the claim that decisions concerning her private estate were finalised near the end, and that Harry and Meghan were no longer part of that future plan. That interpretation makes later events look far less emotional and far more deliberate. When King Charles III asked the Sussexes to leave Frogmore Cottage in 2023 after Spare came out, the public saw a father reacting to a son's public attacks. But this version of events suggests Charles may have been carrying forward a line already set in motion by his mother. In that reading, Frogmore was not just a housing issue. It was a visible sign that the couple's last real foothold in royal Britain had been removed. That is why the sealed will of Queen Elizabeth II has become such a point of suspicion in royal gossip. By tradition, royal wills stay sealed for decades, which leaves plenty of room for doubt and palace speculation. Reports have suggested that Harry and Meghan wanted greater transparency, with concern that the late Queen's final wishes may have been interpreted in a way that worked against them. Whether true or not, it shows just how deep the mistrust had become. To understand why things allegedly reached that stage, many royal watchers point back to the tense run-up to the 2018 wedding. In Spare, Harry describes a hostile palace atmosphere and singles out Angela Kelly, the Queen's longtime dresser and trusted aide, over the tiara dispute. But palace-friendly accounts tell a very different story. They argue that Kelly was following strict rules, while frustration grew over what staff saw as unreasonable pressure and a lack of respect for royal protocol. In that version, Tiaragate was never about cruelty from staff. It was about historic crown jewels being treated as if they could be rushed out for a private hair appointment. Palace insiders have long claimed that Harry and Meghan wanted immediate access to the Queen Mary Diamond Bandeau without going through the normal security procedures. To staff, that was not a small request. It was a major breach of how the royal household handled priceless state items. The issue reportedly exploded when Harry pushed back hard. Instead of seeing the delay as routine security, he allegedly treated it like sabotage. That moment mattered because it was seen inside the palace as more than stress before a wedding. It was taken as a sign that the Sussex approach to royal life was already clashing with the institution's deep traditions. This is where Queen Elizabeth II is said to have started pulling back emotionally. The monarchy, to her, was about discipline, duty, and restraint. But the Sussex style, according to critics, seemed increasingly driven by urgency, image, and personal preference. That difference would only become more visible as the wedding approached. Another story often repeated by royal commentators involves St. George's Chapel itself. Meghan reportedly disliked the old smell of the chapel and wanted fragrance diffusers used before the guests arrived. Palace officials were said to have shut that idea down immediately, stressing that the chapel was a sacred place of worship, not a luxury venue to be altered for comfort or style. That moment has lived on because it symbolized something bigger. To palace traditionalists, it suggested Meghan was viewing royal spaces as settings to be adjusted rather than historic institutions to be respected. Whether every detail was exactly as reported or not, the story gained traction because it fit the wider palace complaint that the Sussex worldview did not match the culture they were entering. The tiara dispute added even more strain. Palace-aligned accounts say Angela Kelly was not being difficult at all. She was simply enforcing rules around the movement of major royal jewels. These were not decorative items to be checked out on demand. They were tightly controlled pieces of royal history, moved only under strict security arrangements. One of the most quoted lines from this whole saga is the Queen's reported response to Harry: "It is not a toy." That phrase, whether repeated exactly or polished by retelling, captured the palace mindset perfectly. The message was simple and sharp. Meghan was not marrying into a celebrity bubble. She was marrying into a sovereign institution with rules that could not be bent for convenience. Palace insiders often sharpen the contrast by bringing up Catherine. During her own wedding preparations, she was widely described as calm, respectful, and careful with protocol. One repeated anecdote says she used a plastic tiara during hair trials rather than ask for unnecessary movement of the real one. That comparison may be flattering to Catherine, but it has been used again and again to show the difference in how the two women were viewed inside royal circles. Even Meghan's Givenchy wedding dress reportedly caused some private discomfort. Royal commentators like Ingrid Seward have claimed the Queen held old-fashioned views about a divorcee wearing pure white and may have preferred a softer shade like ivory or cream. On its own, that sounds minor, but alongside the perfume issue and the tiara row, it became part of a longer list of moments that allegedly weakened trust before the wedding day even arrived. By the time the ceremony began, the public saw glamour, history, and a modern royal love story. But behind the scenes, many royal watchers say the mood among senior figures was already far more strained. That tension became especially visible during the sermon delivered by the Most Reverend Michael Curry, which thrilled many viewers around the world with its passion and energy. Inside the chapel, though, the reaction was reportedly much more reserved. According to royal reporting tied to Robert Hardman and accounts cited in the Times, the Queen's preference for the quiet structure of the Church of England made the sermon's dramatic American style feel unusually intense for such a formal royal occasion. Cameras caught stiff faces, sideways glances, and expressions that later became part of endless royal analysis. To traditionalists, that sermon represented the deeper issue at the centre of the Sussex problem. A royal wedding, in their eyes, was meant to be solemn and rooted in continuity, not shaped around personality and performance. That is why this moment is still framed by critics as one of the clearest signs that Harry and Meghan were leaning towards celebrity, personal expression, and spectacle over the quieter model of family duty and service the Queen had spent her life protecting. What raised the most eyebrows inside palace circles was not the ceremony itself, but the guest list surrounding it. Senior courtiers were reportedly stunned to see A-list Hollywood figures like Oprah Winfrey, George Clooney, and Idris Elba sitting in highly prized seats, in some cases appearing more prominently placed than Harry's own extended family or members of the Queen's loyal household. Palace chatter later pushed the claim that when asked how well they knew the couple, the Clooneys allegedly admitted they barely knew them at all. To royal traditionalists, that looked less like intimacy and more like image building. To the Queen, this reportedly felt like a branding move, not just a wedding choice. In that reading, a 1,000-year-old royal tradition was being turned into a high-profile networking stage. The presence of celebrity guests who were seen as social outsiders to the family added to the impression that the event was doubling as a launchpad for a global Sussex profile, not simply a solemn commitment tied to the crown and the British public. Behind the elegant moment where Prince Charles stepped in to walk Meghan down the aisle, there was also a swirl of embarrassment and last-minute crisis. The sudden revelation that Meghan's father, Thomas Markle, had staged paparazzi photos for money just days before the wedding sent the palace into full damage control mode. Then came reports of his health crisis and his absence from the ceremony, leaving the monarchy to clean up a mess many insiders felt should have been handled with more openness from the beginning. While the public saw Charles escorting Meghan as a gracious and touching act of unity, insiders reportedly say the Queen viewed the whole Markle family saga as messy and deeply undignified. It brought a level of tabloid confusion right to the gates of the crown, and that was something she was said to find especially distasteful. By the end of the wedding weekend, palace staff were no longer in any kind of honeymoon mood. Complaints had already started to circulate about Meghan's treatment of advisors, staff, and the so-called men in grey suits. Her fast-moving West Coast style reportedly did not go over well inside a royal system built on tradition, hierarchy, and measured procedure. Sending demanding emails before dawn may have felt efficient from one point of view, but to some staff, it came across as pressure and disruption rather than dedication. Meghan would later present herself as the one who was mistreated, yet Hardman's later reporting reinforced claims that formal concerns had been raised inside the palace about the Sussex household's abrasive behaviour, especially toward junior female aides. One aide was even said to have been left visibly shaken after a clash over what should have been a minor logistical issue. Whether every palace detail can be fully proven or not, the broader perception matters here. It was during this period that the Queen's attitude reportedly shifted from optimism to caution. She began to see that Harry was no longer simply the cheeky grandson who occasionally stepped out of line. He was becoming more defensive, more volatile, and more likely to mirror Meghan's combative tone toward the institution. That is why the Balmoral issue is often described by royal insiders not as a burst of anger, but as a long process of royal risk management. The Queen allegedly came to believe that Harry and Meghan were happy to enjoy the titles, status, jewels, and spotlight of monarchy, while showing too little respect for the staff and structure that kept it functioning. In that context, any hoped-for place within Balmoral was never just a sentimental gift. It was tied to integration, loyalty, and service. By the end of 2018, some inside the palace reportedly felt that integration was clearly failing. Harry and Meghan were no longer seen as adapting to royal life. They were seen as trying to reshape it around themselves. To critics in the institution, that meant personal values were being placed above the sovereign system, and that was the true beginning of the end for many of their royal privileges. If Queen Elizabeth II became the silent judge of Sussex conduct, then Princess Anne became the steady enforcer of the monarchy's survival instinct. Anne has long been known as the hardest-working royal, and her tolerance for melodrama or self-importance is famously thin. As the fallout from the wedding years and the later rupture deepened, Anne reportedly emerged as one of the Queen's most trusted figures in handling delicate internal matters, including oversight tied to final administrative decisions. Accounts linked to Robert Hardman and The Times have described Anne as far more than a bystander in this drama. She was seen as a guardian of standards. Her frustration with Harry and Meghan was not framed as jealousy or family pettiness, but as a deep reaction to what she reportedly saw as a betrayal of royal duty. To Anne, royalty is work, not a lifestyle brand, and that line was not negotiable. So when Harry and Meghan pushed for a half-in, half-out arrangement, Anne was reportedly among those who warned that such a compromise would damage the monarchy's integrity. In her view, allowing them to keep the status and advantages of royal life while selectively avoiding the burdens would poison the system from within. That hard position later appeared to echo in the decision to remove the couple from Frogmore Cottage in early 2023. While Harry's supporters framed the Frogmore move as cruel retaliation after Spare, Palace reporting in 2024 suggested it was part of a longer strategy already aligned with the late Queen's thinking. The principle was simple and brutal. Royal residences are for royals who perform royal duties. Once the Sussexes chose California, the Crown would reclaim what belonged to the working institution. Harry and Meghan reportedly viewed the eviction as a personal blow. But palace insiders say that reaction only proved how far apart their feelings were from institutional reality. And in that transition, Anne's influence was impossible to ignore. As a key figure in matters involving the Queen's private estate arrangements, she became a firm gatekeeper the Sussexes could not pressure, charm, or bypass. When Harry allegedly tried to revisit talk of a Balmoral inheritance, he reportedly did not find sympathy through his father. Instead, he ran into Anne's bureaucratic wall. Royal watchers often point to Anne's coronation appearance, especially that huge red feather blocking part of Harry's view, as a perfect accidental symbol of her role. To many, She came to represent the old guard in living form, standing directly between royal order and Hollywood-style disruption. At the heart of this freeze from Anne and Charles was the same complaint that kept resurfacing again and again. The Sussexes were seen as still wanting protection, status, and financial support without giving the service expected in return. Even after signing major commercial deals with Netflix and Spotify, they continued to push for publicly funded security, a demand that reportedly struck traditional royals as entitled and tone-deaf. That perception only hardened as the public complaints continued. Every time Meghan cried on camera, or Harry spoke bitterly about being cut off financially, Anne reportedly became even more unmoved. To her, airing family grievances in public was not honesty. It was a direct violation of the royal code of discretion, and that is why, even though King Charles III is often portrayed as soft or conflicted when it comes to his youngest son, his actions tell a very different story. By letting Princess Anne handle the Sussex fallout, King Charles has managed to keep a careful royal distance while still making sure the Queen's final directions were carried out exactly as intended. Under that quiet arrangement, the red box decisions were reportedly enforced step by step, with Anne taking the harder public edge, while the King stayed above the daily friction. Even the steady removal of HRH, styling from official material, was seen by royal watchers as part of that same cleanup, all done in line with what palace insiders claim were the late Queen's final wishes. At the same time, reports have long suggested that support once linked to Harry's future in the Highlands was redirected elsewhere. Instead of helping create a lasting Sussex base at Balmoral, those resources were said to be moved toward the children of the Prince and Princess of Wales and wider charitable responsibilities tied to the Crown. Publicly, 2018 looked like a warm royal welcome and a modern new chapter. Privately, later reporting and palace talk have painted something much more fragile and tense. In fact, some of the most dramatic claims go back to the weeks before the wedding itself. According to palace gossip repeated by royal commentators, Queen Elizabeth II was so troubled by the mood around the couple that she considered delaying the wedding. That would have been almost unthinkable for a monarch who spent decades protecting continuity and calm. And in this version, the concern had nothing to do with race or nationality. It was about behaviour, pressure, and the fear that the union could bring lasting instability into a system built on discipline and service. To the Queen, the monarchy was never meant to be a stage for personal image. It was a carefully balanced world of duty, loyalty, and respect for the people who kept it running. As Harry grew more heated in defending Meghan, and as Meghan reportedly pushed harder against palace customs, the Queen is said to have started seeing not a refreshing new addition, but a couple who could disrupt the whole structure from within. That fear, if true, helps explain why the Balmoral issue later became so serious. Harry gave his version in spare, especially during the now famous tiara dispute. In his telling, Angela Kelly came across as obstructive, palace rules looked petty, and Meghan seemed trapped by cold bureaucracy. But later reporting tied to the Times and Robert Hardman pushed a much tougher account. In that version, Meghan did not simply choose the Queen Mary diamond bandeau and wait. She reportedly pressed for access to a specific emerald tiara that carried wider sensitivities, making the whole request far more complicated than Harry suggested. When that request was blocked, palace insiders say tempers flared fast. Meghan was reportedly upset. Harry allegedly lashed out at staff, and the matter turned from a routine royal process into a symbol of something much bigger. To critics inside the palace, this was not a prince standing up for his bride. It was a prince demanding that royal property be handled like a personal styling item. That was exactly the sort of attitude the Queen could not ignore. So when Elizabeth II reportedly delivered the cold line, "It is not a toy," insiders believe she was talking about far more than jewellery. She was talking about the monarchy itself. In her eyes, Harry and Meghan were not treating royal life as a solemn inheritance. They were treating it like something to shape for their own image and use. That one remark has stayed so powerful because it summed up the entire clash in one sharp sentence. And while Meghan later said she had been unprotected by the institution, palace accounts kept pointing to a very different internal picture. According to later reports, complaints from 2018 into 2019 described a household atmosphere filled with tension, fear, and emotional strain. Staff did not describe her style as simply energetic. They described it as intense, demanding, and difficult to manage. The problem was not ambition alone. It was the effect that ambition was allegedly having on everyone around her. One of the most damaging stories involved Meghan allegedly humiliating a young female staffer over a minor scheduling problem. That account became important because it suggested not just impatience, but a wider pattern. The aide was reportedly left in tears, and when the Queen was briefed, her sympathy is said to have cooled sharply. For Elizabeth II, the household staff were not disposable workers. They were trusted people who had given years of service. To mistreat them was to insult the very institution she had spent her life protecting. The same divide showed up again in the flower girl dress dispute. Public memory locked onto Meghan's claim that Kate made her cry, but palace insiders and later reporting pushed a more layered version. In that telling, the issue was not just about fitting dresses, it was about Meghan's tone, the pressure around the fittings, and the tense atmosphere behind the scenes. Catherine, still recovering from pregnancy, was reportedly startled by the lack of empathy and by how heated the whole thing became. Even the later story about flowers and apology has been framed very differently inside palace circles. Meghan presented it as Kate making peace after causing hurt, but insiders have long suggested Catherine's gesture was about keeping the peace before the wedding for the sake of the Queen, not admitting fault. That matters because it feeds the larger palace view that Meghan's public version was selective, showing what helped her case while leaving out what others were dealing with behind closed doors. For Princess Anne, taking private family tensions public was one of the deepest breaks of all. Anne has spent her whole life living by the code that royalty is duty, not performance, and family conflict is not supposed to be turned into global television material. So, after the Oprah interview, and then the Netflix deals and memoirs, Anne reportedly stopped viewing the Sussexes as wounded family members needing patience. She saw them as people willing to damage the institution for sympathy and leverage. That is why the Balmoral question changed so completely. If the Queen once imagined giving Harry and Meghan a permanent Highland sanctuary, palace insiders say she later came to see that idea as a serious mistake. Instead of becoming a place of reflection and service, such a gift could have become part of their media story and public image. In that light, the loss of Balmoral was not about hate. It was about the Crown protecting its own assets from being pulled into a much larger Sussex narrative. By the time Harry and Meghan were openly criticising the monarchy and deepening tensions with the King and the Prince and Princess of Wales, the ground beneath them had already shifted. No safe royal home, no secure Balmoral future, no easy path back through the old doors. In this reading, the red box decisions of 2022 were not a sudden punishment. They were the final lock on a gate that had been closing for years. And at the centre of that final lock stood Princess Anne. According to Robert Hardman's reporting, Anne was one of the very few people the Queen fully trusted to oversee the sensitive cleanup around the Sussex exit. Her bluntness, discipline, and total lack of patience for emotional theatrics made her the ideal shield for the Crown. Whenever Charles was said to soften out of fatherly feeling, Anne reportedly reminded him of the same principle their mother upheld to the end: duty comes before blood. That is why Anne has become such a powerful symbol in this story. She is said to see Balmoral not as family comfort to be handed out lightly, but as a sacred reward for loyalty and service. In her view, you do not leave the job, attack the system, and then still expect to inherit one of its deepest symbols. That line may sound harsh, but it is exactly the line Anne has always represented. The result is what many royal watchers now call a modern royal exile. Harry and Meghan may still carry the name, still get headlines, and still command public attention, but they no longer have real institutional ground beneath them in the UK. The Balmoral dream is gone, the red box verdict stands, and the future has clearly shifted toward William, Catherine, and their children. That leaves the Sussex saga looking less like a triumph and more like a warning. The monarchy survives not through celebrity shine, but through steadiness, silence, and long memory. Meghan entered palace life with a disruptor mindset, but palace critics believe she underestimated the weight of a 1,000-year-old institution. And Harry, in backing that battle, may have learned too late that royalty is not something you simply possess. It is something you prove through duty. So that is the final sting in this whole Balmoral story. The crown moved on, the Sussexes moved west, and what once looked like a grand royal future turned into a California reality where titles could no longer replace service. In the Windsor world, that is the lesson that still hits hardest. Royalty is not a right, it is a duty to be lived. What do you think about this final chapter? Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more royal drama, power shifts, and palace secrets coming next.